Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. A very warm welcome to everyone to yet another session of Conversations on Consciousness. Today, we have a very special guest joining all the way from Mumbai, Surya Tahora ji. We welcome you to our session. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Let us begin with a small prayer. Sarvatma sarvadrugyosau sarvadhyasa nirasakrito Satatam sannidhattam me hridaye paramashivaha. For the benefit of our viewers, I would like to introduce Surya ji to our audience. Surya Tahora ji has a unique combination of personal background and international exposure and education, which makes him an inspiring writer and teacher. He combines his understanding of modern society with the knowledge of Indian philosophy in a unique manner to impact a wisdom that is highly relevant in present day. He has studied Indian philosophy with Swami Dayananda Saraswati ji, a well-known contemporary teacher of Advaita Vedanta in the tradition of Adi Shankaracharya. And he's also a great Sanskrit scholar. Surya ji has worked for several years in L'Oreal Group and Air France in international marketing and strategic planning, both in Paris and Bangkok. He has completed a doctorate in pharmaceutical sciences for the industry from Paris University and a MBA. He has also attended an intensive executive training program at INSEAD School of Management. He is currently Director, Center for Wisdom in Leadership, and Professor at SPJIMR in Mumbai, India. He is teaching spirituality and management for MBA and executive MBA students. Since 1999, Surya ji and his wife Neema Majmudar ji have been giving conferences, conducting seminars and retreats across the world, both in English and French. In the domain of human development and philosophy, the seminars and retreats they conduct incorporate concepts of Indian philosophy with Western psychology, ethics, physics, neurobiology, and management. These activities are aimed at guiding individuals and leaders of various organizations to be more objective, dynamic, and compassionate in an increasingly interconnected and complex world. They have created a bilingual website in French and English titled Wisdom of Rishis, which explains in a modern style the vision of the traditional teaching of Advaita Vedanta with numerous links to articles and videos of their talks. Surya ji is also a great author. He has published in French several books of his teacher Swami Dayananda Saraswati ji. He has translated them, namely The Value of Values, The Fundamental Problem, Morning Meditations and Prayers, Mundaka Upanishad, Kena Upanishad, The Monumentous Task of Translating Gita Home Study Course, a unique set of 9 books over 4,100 pages, which goes comprehensively through all the chapters and verses of Bhagavad Gita is underway. The first 2 volumes are already published so far.
Yeah.
Finally, Surya ji has co-authored with Neema ji the book Living the Vision of Oneness, which expounds the ways in which the vision of Bhagavad Gita and Veda can be utilized in daily life. Surya ji, you have such a wonderful bio. That is, you have influences from management, you have influences from Vedanta, Sanskrit, you are a bilingual French and English. I mean, you might have also, what is your native language that you speak at home at that time?
So native, I would say, since I've gone to French school, I can say French, but at the same time, I was born in a Gujarati family.
Okay.
But the family who migrated from Gujarat 100 years ago in 1895. Yeah.
That makes you a polyglot also. Such a wonderful journey that you have been taken, Surya ji.
Thank you, Manu. Yeah.
So without much ado, let us start with the questions. I'll directly move on to first question. That is, can you tell us about your journey through Vedanta? How did it all start? When did your first inspiration come from? How did it start?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say one inspiration would be my family itself. I mean, being Indian origin and Gujarati, but living far away from India, we still, my family still was nurturing and keeping, let's say, the values and the culture alive, at least the language, so and the food. right? Main influence were in my family were my father and both my grandfather were both like very religious people, like praying and also meditating. And my grandfather on my maternal side was also very early in my childhood, made me read the Mahakarta and Ramayana and so on. So I had all what was like going to come and unfold later in a seed form. Yeah. So then what happened is that, so I was born in Africa, in Madagascar, but then we moved to Paris. And I think one of the big influences was this change of, let's say, country and the opening up to so many, let's say, disciplines. And I was like at that time 10 years old, and I was fascinated by so many fields. Why I was fascinated and I really explored them like thoroughly because I was haunted since I was like quite young, like this age, 10, 12 years old, by really fundamental questions. And many members of my family could not really reply very precisely to that. But in Paris, I was like the whole knowledge field was open, very vibrant intellectual life and so on. So I was reading like crazy. So I was reading from historian of religion and ethnologists. Then I was reading psychology, Jung and Freud. I was reading, of course, French existentialist philosopher and so on. I loved also surrealism, and I loved poetry. I had already this fascination for words and what they can convey. And then political also, I had amazing discussion with some anarchist friends and who wanted to change the world. So all the seeds were there. And at the same time, I was fundamentally a scientist because I was studying science. And I just love to explore the human brain and neurobiology and so on. And also physics with quantum physics, astrophysics. But that said, it seems to be big. But I didn't know first what was really the question I was looking at an answer for. So I was like just exploring all over. But then I was left a little bit dissatisfied. And then what I did is that I began to do the same exploration into Oriental philosophy, Zen, Hinduism, and Sufism. And there I began to ask some question to the people in Paris. You have everything. This is the advantage of this globalized world. You have all teachers from all different traditions. And I began to ask some questions. And maybe the teacher I met couldn't really reply to what I was looking for. And they were asking me either to go to their experience or leave my questioning and inquiring mind aside, which I didn't feel at that time already that it was right. And so then there was a lot of despair and a lot of, let's say, anxiety, which was like simmering down. Like, yeah, should I drop the whole thing or what should I do? So it was amazing. So that was, now I'm jumping at the age of 30. And I said first, I took one resolve, which is I dropped the books. Enough of the books. I want to meet a guru. I want to meet a teacher. This is where all the influence of my family came, my grandfather. And I say, I want to find a teacher of Vedanta. And at that time, I was visiting my parents in Reunion Island, which is an island in the Indian Ocean. And there was there one Swami Advayananda, who had an ashram. And he was a former student of Swamiji and Swami Viditatvananda from the Sandipani time. And I went to him and I asked him, are you a guru? I want to learn from you. So it was very interesting. Find a French student of Swamiji who was a sannyasi and who was like amazing. He opened the whole world of Vedanta to me. However, after 3 months, I exhausted maybe his patience. And he told me, listen, why don't you go and see my teacher directly? So he's the person who told me, yeah, now go and see Swami Dayananda Saraswati, go to South India, and all your question, hopefully we'll find some answers. So this is how, let's say, the whole journey unfolded. So what is really interesting is that I had never gone to India.
Okay.
So the first time I went to India, it was to meet Swamiji. So I
Great.
was at that time 30 years old. Yeah. So it was something amazing. Yeah.
So when did you meet your Guruji?
Yeah.
That is Swami Dayananda ji, and what are the influences that he has on you? And could you please share some nuggets from your interaction with Swamiji? And when did you
Yeah,
take up the full-time course after this?
yeah. So I will come to that. So
Yeah.
in '95, I was there, and I was like mesmerized. I see, I had gone to so much exploration. Then when I heard Swamiji, I was not taken by him at the personal level, but by this depth and how he was like so rigorous and inviting all doubts. I mean, that was something which was amazing for me. How can a spiritual or wisdom tradition like invite all the doubts and not download things in form of advices? So that I just love this inquiring and the depth of his mind. So that was one thing I was like totally immediately fascinated by. And I was so fascinated, I wanted to take the course there itself. In '95, there was a 3-year course that my wife, in fact, Nima, was joining. So I met her also at that time. And I asked Swamiji, I want to join. I was like totally taken. And he said, no, no, what is your situation and what are your parents doing? And it's true that my parents were in a difficult situation. And Swamiji said, no, you have to take care of your mom, who had some health problem, and then you will come back later. And what was amazing from him, he said, come every year to me whenever you have time. But in the meantime, begin to study. I will send you the tapes. At that time, it was the time of the tapes, you know,
Yes.
the whole course. So you can study that, take some books, and come to me every year. And this is what I did. And I was continuing to, let's say, work. And the opportunity to study full time came only till 2010. So I spent, in fact, 15 years studying, let's say, of course, with Swamiji's books and tapes and so on, and coming regularly to Rishikesh or Coimbatore for any 1-month course or 10 days course or whatever that he was conducting, and keeping the whole thing alive.
So you
So
were
that
at
was,
Paris that time?
at that time, I was initially I was in Paris, in Réunion Island, because I stayed with my parents who didn't need me at that time. And then I moved to Bangkok.
Okay. Okay.
And then I was working. This is where I was working at the Asia Pacific headquarters of Air France and so on. Yeah.
So could you share some interactions with Swamiji that really inspired you? And as you mentioned,
Yeah.
we have to go through our universal experiences and
Yeah.
get the answers from that,
Yeah.
answers to that, and not just blind advices. I think
Absolutely.
that is where Swamiji has influenced you by your interactions.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So the major influence that I think he had on me was to revisit my connection with what does God or Ishvara means. I think this was something which was just, it was a big revolution in my mind. And I was already, let's say, a bhakta, but without really knowing what was I was praying for or to, and what was the nature. And that was the major thing. And one line of Swamiji, I think I will never forget, and which is, yeah, the Ishvara is not a belief. It's not to be believed in. It's a matter of understanding. And of course, there are like then ways to relate to Ishvara. And he was always very emphatic on this need for this relationship with Ishvara. So I think that was the one of the main influence which really deepened my devotion. And the second thing was, I think, his love for words and the way he was like really unlocking very patiently. Sometimes afterwards when I went to his retreats, and or even when I was reading the Gita study, so he'll spend pages just unlocking one word, unlocking what is raga dvesha. He will spend like 2 weeks or 10 pages or 20 pages. So that really fascinated me. And see, this is, maybe I have this mind which is this inquiring mind, but now this inquiring mind got a direction where to inquire into and how
Correct.
to inquire, with what help. And the word's beauty, I was just fascinated by.
It is a wonderful journey, Suraj, that you have had from growing up abroad, coming to India, meeting your guru. That has been a fascinating journey altogether. And you mentioned how you had a bhakti inside yourself, but you have not expressed it, and you did not know what it was.
Yeah,
And there is a belief that the religion aspect of it and a spiritual aspect, that is philosophy aspect, are two different belief systems.
Yeah.
What is your take on this?
Yeah. So it's a big question. I think obviously everything that you see, we come back to words. What do you mean by religion and spirituality? Okay. And then you can have a take, and then we can look at what Vedanta and Swamiji is speaking about that, because he has spoken also about that. So first of all, see, being having lived in Europe for so many years, I was seeing how people have like gotten away from the sacred. Okay, the religion is also a connection with the sacred. Okay, but then what is happening is that what was happening in most of the friends I was interacting with, they had this sense of the sacred, but they couldn't accept anymore the teaching, the doctrines, or the beliefs of the religious tradition that they of their childhood. Okay, so mostly there it was Christianity, and I had also some Muslim with me, and I even had some Hindus, right, and some Buddhists, some Vietnamese people, for example. So the idea is that these people were saying, and it was also to some extent my predicament, which is I was feeling that there is a deeper reality, but it was vague. I didn't know what it was about. And but I couldn't connect to it. And these people also, these friends could not connect to it with the means of the rituals and prayers and liturgy and that they in which they grew up, right? And therefore, they seem to say, okay, so now what do I do? Since it seems to be empty and it's only about form and there is no more spirit in it, there is no more, like, it's not alive anymore. And I cannot establish any emotional connection with it. Hey, what can I do, right? Give up. So some people choose to give up, okay? But then, not even further than give up, then concluding that forget the whole thing. And then the problem is that then you fall back into this mindless pursuits of everything. But still, for some of them, if you don't deny this fundamental human need for sacred, for meaning, then I mean you have to come to somewhere. So what is interesting is that now I'm taking my hat of an academician and researcher. It's interesting that religion and spirituality, in fact, it's only recently that there is a kind of dichotomy between the two. In fact, initially they were taken as one. In all the literature and researcher, religion and spirituality were synonyms, interchangeable, right? And a lot of writing and researchers have spoken about the health benefit, psychological benefit, less anxiety, less depression, less likelihood to commit suicide, how religion / spirituality enhance overall sense of well-being, happiness, longevity, better general health, and so on. And also the benefits of being part of a community, okay, this social bond, right? And but then this now is questioned. So what I saw when I was in Europe, and also now in the student that I teach when I go to Europe, is that the new prevalent forms to substitute, let's say, what the religion was doing, this aspiration to be connected to something bigger and deeper, then the new form can be either a hodgepodge of 100 different spiritual traditions, a little bit of Sufi, a little bit of mindfulness, a little bit of this practice, a little bit of psychedelic also drugs and ayahuasca, for example. It's a big thing. People
Yes.
equate the transcendent so-called experience by these drugs with spirituality, right?
Correct.
So see, this is the distorted form that this quest for the sacred takes. Another way it takes is just go to, oh, I am meditating, and mindfulness, which has its roots in Buddhism, now it has become huge in US and Europe. But there is no Ishvara there. But there is what? A connection to yourself and to what is happening inside and so on, inside you. So it's very interesting. And I see that psychology and mindfulness and are like a substitute, but I would say still one step towards growing to something more spiritual, authentic spirituality. And this is how the story is. Now, if you come to Vedanta point of view, it's quite interesting. Uh, Vedanta point of view will share a lot of the definition that modern researchers, how they define spirituality. It's very interesting. So listen to that. I will not be long.
Yes, yes, please.
One thing is how they define, how the researcher, academician, okay, we're all philosophers or sociologists or ethnologists or psychologists. How do they define spirituality? So they say spirituality refers to the individual search for the sacred, okay? So this is the jargon, okay? For deep meaning, for oneness, for certain elements of transcendence, and also reaching one's, as a human being, one's higher potential, highest potential. So you look at the definition. Now, if you bring Vedanta there, it will fulfill all these different elements, right? Now, another way also to speak about, if you go a little bit further on the definition of spirituality, instead of saying it is looking for sacred without God, which is a too reductionist, let's say, a too simplistic definition, four elements of spirituality. One is interconnectedness or connectedness with oneself. So maybe one deeper self, you can take it. Connectedness with others and connectedness with, being connected with a source of ultimate meaning or concern. Right? So one element, connectedness. Second element, meaning, right? How can I make sense of the universe and what is my role and place within it, right? This also is what the Vedanta is speaking about, right? It's amazing. Third aspect, very interesting, transcendence. Okay, so in their jargon, this researcher, they say it's about overcoming just the physical and psychological limitation that you impute to yourself, right? It's amazing, transcending, right?
Yes.
Of course, it's vague. They don't have the understanding of Satya Mithya and so on, right? And they're a little bit lost in the articulation here. But there is an important element of this. What is this transcendence? What is the Satyam of everything? And the last component is interesting. I think it's particularly interesting. They call it innerness, but it means development and growth to a larger, let's say, wholeness, right? To be Atmavan, to be Yuktaha, right? All these words which are there in the Gita, right? How
Yes.
do you grow and develop yourself to be a full human being, right? So there is a process and a journey of growth. So this is the four dimension that the researchers are looking at, right? So connectedness, meaning, transcendence, and then innerness. It's beautiful and growth, right?
Correct.
So if you come to Swamiji, so I would say it's very interesting. He spoke about this very in various ways. One, he said, spirituality can be called spirituality when it is immediate. It means when the spiritual tradition, whatever names it has, and can be called Vedanta if you want, if it sees that there is an as though human fundamental problem of inadequacy, incompleteness, and so on, but which can be solved here and now. So the immediacy of the reality and let's say the discovery is here and now. It's not in the form of a promise tomorrow or in a place where you have to go to some heaven or some loka or whatever, right? And so that is amazing. So that was one element he was saying, which was interesting for me. And then it restricts the whole thing. Now look at this now, very interesting. He said also, spirituality cannot be called spirituality if it bypasses Ishvara. And by Ishvara, by settling accounts with Ishvara, with relating with Ishvara, this human growth is also something you cannot bypass in the name of here and now. Oh, I am consciousness, I am Brahman, I am limitless. So this articulation between the maturity, which is, and the preparedness, which is necessary to just see clearly what is happening when the words of the scriptures are coming and unfolding this reality. I think this is what makes Swamiji's definition of Vedanta and spirituality really unique, right?
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you have wonderfully answered. Now that yoga has become so world popular, they
Yeah.
completely dissociate with the Sanatana Dharma itself. Yoga has
Yeah.
has got nothing to do with Sanatana Dharma, is their claim. But I
Yeah.
think your answer will uh,
Yeah.
refute that. Thank you so much for that wonderful answer. Yeah. Moving on,
Yes, one.
you're also a management professional that you teach management in a university, and you have also incorporated Eastern wisdom traditions being one of your prime focus area. And you also teach Advaita Vedanta for management professionals. And how do you see Vedanta in the light of management? You bring in two different streams of traditions together.
Yeah.
How do you see that?
Yeah. So first of all, a small clarification. I am not teaching management. I am a full-time professor in SPJMR, which is one of the leading business, management schools in India, at par with IIMs and so on, right? But I am not teaching finance or marketing. What I'm teaching is really, so the course I'm teaching have different names across programs, okay? So it can be a journey to self-mastery. It can be leading with wisdom. It can be growing as an individual. It can be anchoring practices or centering yourself as a leader, right? So all these different names are there. So what is the idea here, right? And what is the justification of this having this subject, by the way, which is compulsory in our management school, okay? So if you graduate from this MBA program, 1 year or 2 years like executive, they all have to go, I mean,
It's a compulsory paper.
compulsory, okay? They must have passed this credit. So it's very interesting. Then I do also, so here I do also some electives, which are not compulsory that people choose, okay? So what is the articulation? I think it's very relevant. I mean, Vedanta is very relevant uh, because the students or the executive, I am, let's say, sharing what I've learned from Vedanta, they are human beings. It's not that executive or special category of people,
Yes.
right? So you cannot say, yo, oh, I am an executive in part of my life, and then I am another kind of human being. And in my executive life, I will be like this, mean and only profit-oriented and devoid of any emotion and only analytical and rational and aspiring only for my career and my benefit. I mean, you're a full human being. So I always emphasize this point in my classes. I say, hey, don't expect me to bring Vedanta as only for management. What I am telling you will impact you as a human being because it addresses you at a deeper level, right? So from this role that you're playing as a family member, as a spouse, as a father, as a friend, as a colleague, and also as a professional, all these roles come back to one center person, and this is the person that I'm addressing. So this is one thing, okay? Second thing, there is a growing, let's say, awareness now in management schools and all over, especially also engineering also. Maybe you have an engineering background, I don't know. But many of my students have, is that their studies have developed only part of themselves, right? Only this very analytical and cognitive side, and they're recruited on what basis? Their scores on SAT, which is IQ, basically, right?
Correct.
Highly cognitive and very clever. But there are so many domains and part of themselves which are still to be developed, right? So this is this awareness. And what Vedanta can add in that, okay? So it's very interesting. So I will give you some example of how I take Vedanta into my classes, okay? So first of all, I don't speak about Brahman. I don't speak about consciousness, okay? I think unless really you are looking for it, it's not a teaching that you have to share.
Yes.
Okay. Now, that said, there is a large part, for example, in Bhagavad Gita, right? And all over, in fact, but more maybe importantly in Bhagavad Gita, there's a large part of the teaching which is not just Brahma Vidya. It is also what is called this Yoga Shastra, this maturity and this preparedness for this knowledge. So here, what are the section of the teaching of Vedanta, which is highly relevant, is this section, right? I would say, I don't make the connection absolutely clear that this growth and this maturity that they will get, then will enable them to take on further and have this antakarana shuddhi, this purification of their mind and themselves, that then will pave the way for understanding the words of Vedanta. I don't make that connection. I think it is like complicating the whole issue, right? At the same time, I see a lot of, let's say, benefits. For example, one thing, very simple, and this is a big craze, which is meditative practices. Okay? So Swamiji speaks about one thing in this meditation, coming back to the simple, basic, powerful person. Not Atma, we are not speaking about consciousness. The simple, relaxed individual person, right? So I take with all the meditation I had with him, so my executive students just love this. Why? Because it enables them to familiarize themselves with the deeper side of themselves, which is like naturally relaxed and tranquil and anchored, and they need this centeredness, right? In their professions, in the executive or any profession, in fact. Now I can widen.
Yes.
You need to take decision in a very fast moving and very uncertain environment, in where you don't have all the information, where let's say the stakes are sometimes high, where the emotional load and intensity is high. So how do you find a space in you to reconnect to this basic awareful person? Okay, so big, right? So this is one, very easy. The other one, obviously, is raga dvesha.
Correct.
Okay. So what I am doing is that I'm bringing some elements of cognitive psychology, particularly cognitive behavioral, let's say, therapy, because the approach of Vedanta is very much also cognitive, right? And I supplement some tools and some framework of cognitive behavioral, let's say, therapy with raga dvesha, for example, right? And I bring alive the elements of what is pratibhasika, what is subjectivity, what is objectivity, and the need to be lucid in assessing what is going on here before taking any decision. So it has absolutely its place here, right?
Yes. Yes.
Then what? Adhyasa. I speak about adhyasa, right? How when we project something on either a promotion or a person or some object that we want, right? And which is not in keeping with what is. So how can you grow and become more objective? So I think this is immediately connected to what they need. Another framework I use a lot, and which the students and the executive like, is this Trigunyatmika, let's say, model, this Triguna Sattva Rajas Tamas model, which is in the Gita. And I expand upon what the Gita is saying, because it speaks about what is a tamasic karta and rajasic karta and sattvic karta. Then it speaks about same for Shraddha, your world perspective, right? And how you take also the results of the action. So this is a big, let's say, thing that you can share, and people become aware from where they act, right? Are they predominantly in that? And I give them, I think this is also an important thing, not just advices and dumping on them these frameworks, but then how do you become and grow if you are aware that you are some, let's say, tendency to be a rajasic, let's say, karta, or to have this binding raga dvesha, what are they? And how can you neutralize them? So here there are practices which are necessary. And maybe Swamiji didn't give all of them in a systematic way, but that I brought all together, right? People need practices and tools. Another one which I love, Manu,
Yes.
is the one sentence from Yoga Vashishta. It's not elaborate. It's just saying, so Vashishta is telling Rama, who is like totally dejected and he's in his youth and he's not sure what he has to do. And then Vashishta is telling him, hey, all these doubts, just shed, right? Come back and what? Become a Mahakarta. Become a Mahabhukta. right? So this is an amazing, let's say, thing that you can expand on. What is an ordinary karta, right? Who has no clue of karma yoga or nothing, right? Like as we live, most of us were living our lives. Then what is in between already a person who is taking care of, oh, now I am in the process. I am not just an ordinary karta. Now I am working, right, on myself. I am not just like bound by only the pleasurable and the immediate outcome of my action, and then turning into an ordinary bhokta again when it doesn't happen my way. So this person who is in between, who is not yet a Mahakarta, is the person is transition with the person who is growing, right? And then what are the characteristics of a Mahakarta? And same for bhokta, right? So here, if you map all these characteristics, it's a framework which is very beautiful to help them and make them reflect upon from what space they are acting and receiving results of action, right? So that is the whole thing. And obviously in that you bring all karmani eva adhikaraste, samatvam yoga uchate, yeah? All these verses, beautiful verses of the Gita.
Yes.
And it resonates amazingly with them. Yoga, karmasu koshanam. That also dharma, a big one, right?
Yes.
That's the values. I mean, I think it's like, especially maybe some people will say, especially in management school, it's important also not only that they learn to deal with their emotion and their subjectivity, but also with the values, right?
Correct. Correct.
And it is connected, right?
Yes. Yes. I think your answer gives us a clear clarity that Vedanta is universal. It is not just restricted to a person, land mass, nothing. It is universal in nature. It applies to
Yeah,
every single individual in a different levels altogether.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you mentioned how you bring in Bhagavad Gita to management lessons, and it
Yes.
has already been widely popularized.
Yeah.
Can you please expound how you interconnect Bhagavad Gita verses with management lessons? And also, what are the other Vedantic texts that you bring in to management lessons?
Yeah. So see, Gita is not a management book. That has to be very clear. Okay. If you want to use the word management, you can say self-management.
Yes.
But it's not a management book.
Correct.
And sometimes I feel very sad because I see a lot of books on the Gita which are either very jargonish, applying to leadership or management, and you don't understand anything because they are bringing Atma there, they're confusing everything, right? And so jargonish, a lot of Sanskrit, and you don't understand anything much what is the, let's say, really what they want to convey and how it can be helpful. If it's in form of advice, yeah, be sattvic. Yeah, I know. Okay, now I know a new word which is sattva instead of rajasic, but then how does it help me? How do I grow into a sattvic person? So this is one of the problems I see in this so-called taking Gita as a management book. Okay, so one is jargon and in the form of advice, which doesn't help the person grow. I think Swamiji was very clear about that. I mean, it's a teaching, right?
Yes.
You have
Yes.
to make the person see and help the person grow. The second thing I would say is that this idea of being like not looking at the tatparya of the text, what the text wants to convey. So if the Gita wants to help you grow as an individual, okay, I have some people, for example, they take this Panchakosha, okay, of Taittiriya Upanishad, right? That you know, this Annamaya and
Yes.
Pranamaya and so on. So they
Anandamaya
take
Kotra,
this
Vijnanamaya
and they
Kotra.
apply this in an organization. They say, yeah, an organization can be seen at these 5 different levels. So I think this is not making justice to what the Gita or the Vedanta texts are wanting to convey. What they want to convey is not that, right? And so here it is,
Yes.
they try to club some so-called management organizational, let's say, concepts without really looking into what Gita wants to convey in a very superficial way to make it like appear a little bit exotic. But in the process, nothing is happening, right? So this is I would say the limitation, okay, of trying to pick and choose without having studied in depth the text. Okay, now
By doing
about
this, we lose the essence of both the worlds.
okay, exactly, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and you leave the person high and dry, right?
Correct.
Or even worse, you leave the person in a state where they can pretend with using some very fancy vocabulary now, so-called Vedanta vocabulary, and then pretend that they know everything. But in fact, you dig a little bit, there is nothing,
Yes.
nothing practical, applicable, which is helping the person to evolve, right?
Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
particular text you were asking me, right?
Yes, yes. Any text that you teach in the class?
No particular text. It's a selected verses of the Gita.
Okay.
And as I said, these concepts or these ideas of pratibhasika and vyavaharika, objectivity, subjectivity, triguna, raga, dosha, binding, non-binding, and obviously also all the portion of the Gita, which is speaking about the nature of the universe as pervaded by this amazing intelligence, right? Laws of cause and effect and orders at different level. I think this part is something which resonates a lot with people, right?
Yeah.
And how maybe here the difficulty is that not enter into, again, a religious kind of mind and try to tell them this is God and you have to accept it, but make them see that this is the reality of the universe, right? And then with what we know about Vedanta and the nature of Ishvara, even if you don't say Ishvara, I am saying, but if you don't say, then it's okay, it's acceptable, right? That the whole creation is pervaded by this at so many different levels, right? And you give examples, and then it goes and it expands their perspective of the universe and their place in the universe, right? I think without this also, you cannot really explain verses like Karmani eva adhikaraste. You cannot explain verses like Samadvam Yoga Uchate. You will be restricted just to take it as a pragmatic, let's say, kind of view. But here you enhance the perspective by bringing these laws, right? And so this is what I take, okay? So no particular text, but
Okay.
any text of Vedanta which is dealing with maturity or meditation, but not Brahma Vidya.
Okay. Thank you so much for that wonderful
Yeah,
answer.
yeah,
Moving on, you teach leadership development, and of course, you are practicing Vedantin also.
yeah,
And how is Vedanta useful in leadership development?
yeah.
How can a seeker or how can a wannabe leader take lessons from Vedanta and develop the leadership qualities?
Yeah. So see, in fact, your question, I have already partially answered to it, okay, by speaking about management,
Yes.
right? See, leadership and management are two distinct words. And, but I mean, for the sake of our conversation, it can be, let's say, very much applicable because leadership is not just for the top political leaders or only for the CEOs or the top senior executive. Everyone can be a leader, right? And so you have to expand on the meaning of what does it mean, a leader? Okay? And see, the idea here is to take it back again to the human side, right? And the idea is what? When the fundamental views of ourselves and the universe in which we operate, okay, are not in keeping with the reality, right? There is an amount of subjectivity here, right?
Correct.
Then they become a cause of suffering, either for yourself or by your action. If your, let's say, perspective of things is only self-centered, then you will end up hurting people, right?
True.
So, I mean, it's as simple as that. So now the whole approach and how I link it to something in leadership circles is that there is one word which is called mental model or mindset, right? Which is like some kind of buzzword or some commonly word used in this circle. So here I apply what is your mental model or your belief or your conclusion about your role as a leader? What is your conclusion about the place and the role of an organization with reference to society it evolves in, right? Is it only profit or it is much more? So already in leadership circles, right, there is a lot of, let's say, it's a growing awareness of what, hey, economic, of course, and financial is important, but governance is very important. Nature and environment is very important, right? And social is important, okay? A lot of this management school, whether it's just like to fit and because it appears nice in their vision and organizations speak about social impact, and especially in India, I mean, you cannot be a business person and a CEO or even an executive in India without thinking about the impact of what you're doing in the less privileged section of the society, right?
Correct. Very true.
And we see it every day, right?
Yes.
So I think this is one angle which is very important, okay? Your whole view of the world and your role in the overall scheme of things, right? So, and the second thing I go into is that one key element of leadership is this being aware of the stories that you are telling yourself, okay? And these stories can express themselves, if you take the Vedanta jargon, in the form of ragadvesha, which can be binding, right? Or in the form of a lot of subjectivity, right? And therefore, your decision will be taken on that basis and have some result which will have an impact, which will not be helpful, nor for you, nor for the other. So how can you be aware of these stories? And how can you be aware of your own story of meaning? What is important to you? So I don't go into, forget everything and artha, kama, and dharma is useless, and this is all materialistic and it's all useless. I mean, this is not the truth. It has its place,
Yes.
right? Of course, you have to discover their limitation. Many spiritual so-called teachers, they negate the importance of artha, kama, and dharma, and they go straight to moksha and to consciousness. It doesn't work. So
Correct.
in leadership, if you go that way, it doesn't work because it's not helpful and not useful, and it's not the reality. Any human being has a need to fulfill some of his artha and kama. It's a legitimate and natural need of any human being. The pursuit of security, okay, wealth, ambition, power, influence, there is nothing wrong, right? But if you think this is what will give you lasting fulfillment, and this is what I make them reflect upon. So one of the core of this leadership, for example, classes I give is make them reflect on their current story of meaning. What is important and valuable for me? What gives me some kind of fulfillment? Okay. And what are the goals now that it expresses itself practically into? And what are the action I take to do that? So this can be, let's say, done very easily. And it's beautiful because you realize how much this executive have a value. You would say, oh, career and money is first. It's not true.
Correct.
When I ask them to say, what are the top 3 or top 5, your sources of winning, very often in the top 3, there will be family.
Yes.
It's amazing, right? So you don't have to devalue and discount them and treat them as materialistic. They have some values, but then you can expand that and take that to, okay, family is amazing, beautiful. What about community in which you live? Extending your circle of concern and your circle of influence, right? And contribution. And that they are very sensitive to that, especially the, let's say, executive. I give some, there is some MBA classes for executive who have already like 10, 15 years experience. Then it strikes a chord. The youngster, they are still, I want to get this promotion and this. But at the same time, they are sharp and they see some validity.
Correct.
So I just plant the seeds here for the future, right?
Correct. Thank you. And Surya ji, you have also been a successful author of Vedanta. Apart
Yeah.
from your academic pursuit, you have also been writing and translating works. Can you please tell about your works? What are the translations that you have done? What are the individual works that you have taken up?
Yeah. So the bulk of what I have done is not really as an author, but more a translator, okay, of books of Swamiji. And so I think a few days ago I was preparing a kind of bio data, and I was looking. I said, "My God, I did already translated 10 books of Swamiji." So I was so happy about that, and already this Gita study, which I find is a jewel, okay, an amazing contribution of Swami Dayananda. And already second volume is available in French. So here it is. My how it was. Let's say how did it come to my mind is very interesting. First of all, I've been translating. I mean, since '95. Why? Very easy. I mean, and this is also the situation of many of the non-English speaking or non-Sanskrit speaking people,
Yes.
which is what? Hey, now there is a teaching in English and in Sanskrit, and I am a Romanian or a German or a Spanish, and I'm not understanding this. It's not my primary language,
Yes.
right? So this idea of translating for me was, hey, I want to really, in the language, which is the language in which my Buddhi is operating fundamentally, which is French, I want to capture these words. I knew the importance of words and how they can fire and trigger something in you, right? Some insights. Even though English for me had this capacity, I had to go one step further and be able to do that work of converting that into my own word in my own language.
Yes.
So what began as really for myself, then it began to be useful also for other French people. And so it was for my own clarity, right? And then it began to, let's say, benefit others. So that is this. So that is the translation part. The other part is the book I co-wrote with my wife, and maybe we can speak about this later. Yeah.
And you mentioned particularly about how words can trigger meaning
Yes.
instantaneously.
Yeah.
You have translated works from Sanskrit to French
Yeah.
and English,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
And what are the primary challenges that you faced while translating these particular works? Because both English and French, I don't know about French, both English and French lack in articulation of some fundamental Sanskrit words. For example, samatva, for example, dharma. And so in terms of Vedantic jargons and terminologies, what are the sort of approaches that did you take to express Swamiji's thoughts?
Good, nice question.
How did you go about it?
Yeah. So see, I took the approach that Pujya Swamiji took. What was his approach? See, he had to convey in English with words which have their limitation, as we know, right? A teaching, which is in Sanskrit.
Yes.
So what did he do? He retained the words in Sanskrit and then elaborated, gave a basic translation so that people can hook it to something which is known, but then elaborating on it. So I took exactly the same approach. So in the books I do in French, I don't substitute the Sanskrit words by French words. I keep the Sanskrit and immediately, like what Swamiji is doing, like bring the equivalent in French. So it's as simple as that, right? Now, it's difficult for me to give you examples because you don't know French, but I would say it's the same as in English, right? When, for example, Vairagya, the immediate translation, you say dispassion. If I translate that in French as dispassion, same as in English, it will maybe have a connotation of what? Indifference and I don't care and so on, right?
Yes,
Dispassionate. Yes. My student told me that, right? Dispassion. That's all. I have no passion. And what is the fire in my belly that will motivate me to do things, right?
Correct, correct.
Be dispassionate. So see, it's the same problem I had in French, right? Raga Dvesha, I keep them as they are. So likes and dislikes, this is how Swamiji is translating it. So there is no immediate equivalent in French, but then I take what is preferences and aversions, attraction and repulsion. But then I elaborate on that. Another difficult one is binding, right? Okay. Even in English is difficult. So imagine now in French, same. Binding and with the root of this bondage, right? So how do you, then you go into slavery and chaining and being like, let's say, tied with ropes and things like that. I mean, literally it's okay, but then you have to expand and explain. Right?
Yes.
So the way I took, for example, binding in French, now I'm doing reverse. From French, I'm doing to English.
Okay.
I translated it as something which has a power and which has a pressure and a constraint, which puts a constraint on your freedom. So there is a word in French, but I need not say it. It's okay.
Yeah.
You will not understand. But I took this meaning of binding, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's tricky. I mean, sometimes I used to spend like days to find the right words, right? And look at the space from where the French were operating, like what Swamiji was saying. If a word and you translate like attachment, okay, is fraught with some limitation, you have to knock out this limitation. Maybe still use because you don't find any word better, but make sure when you convey and you unlock this word that you knock off this limitation, right? So same.
Thank you. And we are almost out of time. We will take a couple of questions and conclude the session.
Yes.
You mentioned about your work co-authoring with your wife, Nimaji.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
tell about the work, life, living the vision of oneness, exploring the realities and growing as an individual?
Yeah. Yeah. So briefly, because I think Nima would have explained that in detail, so I don't want to reiterate maybe what she had said. I would put it maybe in a simple way. I remember very well Swamiji when he was saying, in the ancient time, before you write a book, you ask yourself the question, what is the added value?
Correct.
Not just writing a book for writing a book. Okay, so in academic language, it is the question is, what is the gap that I'm trying to, which I can see in the books available on the subject matter, and which I'm trying to bridge.
Correct.
So, I mean, there are many very good books on Vedanta, so I'm not claiming this is the only one and so on. But at the same time, I found that the approach is that there are many books commenting in a very scholarly way with a lot of centric Vedanta text. Okay, and that is not accessible to many, right? It takes so much effort, okay, even to Indian themselves.
Correct. Correct. Very true.
So, I mean, the main gap was how can you, without sacrificing on the depth of what you are saying, transmit it in a modern, contemporary language, free of jargon. Okay, so this is one thing. How can you relate it to a life, not of a sadhu living at the time of Shankaracharya, but of a modern man living his normal life in the 21st century? Okay, so, and for that, what was amazing, we gave a lot of example and cases like drawn from our retreats and classes, because these were the contemporary questions and doubts that our student had. So then we said, yeah, let's bring that. Okay? So these are these elements. And I think also very fundamentally, I think there are many books speaking about Brahma Vidya, but there are not so many books with this intention that I have spoken about, speaking about this growing, this growing in the light of understanding of this Ishvara and this order of Ishvara. Okay, so I think it's very critical. This is one of the big contribution of Swamiji to the teaching, and we wanted to dwell into that and expand on that in a modern way, right?
Thank you. And most of the audience that view our programs, view our interviews are grihasthas. I think this
Yes.
question will really benefit them if you could answer. Both
Yeah.
you and your wife are grihasthas and are also into Vedanta, teaching and practicing it at both the times.
Yeah.
What are some of the pitfalls of grihasthashrama as a householder
Yeah.
must be aware of? What are the pitfalls that he must be aware of? And how should he or she avoid it and confront the situation?
So you are speaking about the grahastha who is a mumukshu or a jignasu, yeah?
Yes, yes.
Who is seeking and who is engaged
Who
in
is a
this
seeker?
pursuit, right?
Yes,
Yeah, who
he's
is
a
the
seeker.
seeker? Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's a good question because as you said, it's 98% of the people, right? 99%. The
Yes,
sannyasi
correct.
population is very little, right?
Correct.
And brahmachari as well, right? And so I would say something very simple here, drawn from my own experience and the experience of my students, who are also Grahasthas, right? So one thing, I think, I will start by one thing, which is keep uh, the inquiry alive. Keep the fire of Shravanam alive every day. Okay. So whatever time it is, whether it's half an hour or 1 hour or more, whatever times allows you, because I mean, we're busy people, keep this alive and make it a point to have a regular, let's say, Shravanam Mananam. So it can be in the form of listening to whoever is your teacher, right? Or reading. There are many books now by Swamiji students as well and Swamijis. And so that is one thing. Why do I say that? Because after a few years, it's very easy when you are in this pursuit to think, oh no, now I get it. So I don't need now. I don't need anymore. I have understood the whole thing. So there is a kind of complacency which sets in, right? So to really keep this alive, I think this is an anchor that you can hold on to. Okay, so that is one big thing. So whatever time you have, keep some time alive for you. Second, and this will avoid also, I mean, temptation and distractions and so on, because it's so inviting, right? There are so many possibilities, infinite possibilities to use your time. And there is $1 billion entertainment industry there to try to figure out how to entertain you, okay?
Yes.
Nothing wrong with entertaining you, but then keep the anchor in this, okay? Second, I would say, relating to Ishvara. So in the form of chanting, in the form of prayers, in the form of doing your Sandhya Vandanam regularly, and having some space, some meditative and contemplative space, in addition to this just study of some Upanishad or some Prakarana Grantha. I think that also is the key. So, Maham Brahmanira Kuryam, okay, Kena Upanishad Shanti Mantra. Maham Brahmanira Kuryam. May I not be indifferent and now say, okay, now I know Brahman and the whole thing. Hey, let me keep this alive. Mama Brahmanira Karot. Okay, may I have the grace and the blessing of Ishvara to be able to continue this pursuit, right? And not then go off on a tangent, right? And last thing, if you allow, we have 1 minute,
Yes,
2
yes.
minutes.
Please give us some advice also. Yeah.
One common also thing that many students have, two things come to my mind. One is trying to bridge different spiritual tradition with Vedanta. So they will go and read a lot of Buddhism. They will read a lot of Taoism and Confucianism, which is beautiful, right? It's amazing. There are also, some of them have an amazing teaching tradition as well, right? But then what they do, what is it? They try to understand Vedanta through Taoism or Buddhism, right? So I think this is a big pitfall.
Correct.
Because then it really becomes a big tree in the mind. Okay? They are coming from different spaces. It seems to be more or less the same, but it's not all the same, right? The approach is different. Of course, they are all, let's say, inspired by the same, let's say, the quest of the sacred, the deepest reality. But their approaches are different. So it can be confusing unless you have done enough Shravanam and Mananam, right? So this is one thing I recommend. If you want to explore, explore like crazy, but then come back, because this is where I answer it. Don't try to read the other and understand Vedanta through Buddhism. It doesn't work, right? The second thing is the same pattern. Try to understand Vedanta through science. So I have many of my students are like extremely bright. They're all engineers and so on, and they know some physics, right? So they try to bring, oh, Vedanta is saying exactly what quantum physics is saying. So, just hold on. Just hold on and just look at what you're saying, right? So to this student, I clarify what is the field of, let's say, application of these different means of knowledge, okay? But there is an interesting way you can tell them. You can tell them, go fully. So during the next 3 months, read all what you want to read on consciousness from a neuroscientific point of view. Read everything on the mityatum, on the word, on the apparent irreality or non-tangibility of the word through quantum physics. Read everything and go fully in it, okay? Instead of saying to them, no, it will confuse you, you can tell the opposite. Go fully into it. And then afterwards, you will have no other choice but to come back to it.
Correct. Yes.
So this is some of the pitfalls I have seen with my experience, right?
Thank you so much, Suryaji. I think all of our viewers will be very benefited by these wonderful answers that you have given us, wonderful nuggets from your life journey. Thank you for agreeing to do this interview. Thank you for taking your time from the entire team of Advaita Academy. I thank you immensely. Thank you so much. Viewers, with this, we come to conclusion of another session of Conversations on Consciousness with Suryaji. Please tune into our social media handles. We will be soon posting this video all over there. Thank you so much. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha.
Yes, Manu, just one word. I would like
Yes.
to thank your organization. I mean, you first for making me speak and allowing me and having invited me. And this Advaita Academy is an amazing organization, which is really spreading this teaching and this beautiful content. So my whole namaskar to you and Hari Kiranji and all of you who are like doing all this work, amazing work. So thanks for that.
Thank you so much. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha.